All right, first things first, let's get into the chalkboard and see if it's populated for this week. And what the chalkboard is going to do, essentially, if you're playing DraftKings, or we'll maybe do FanDuel too, but what you're looking for is big price drops. Now, see, you see these three guys here over 10%. It's a pretty significant ownership difference in the quarterbacks. So, being that most people, now not most, not 50%, but quarterback usually gets really, really spread out evenly. There's not usually a big ownership advantage there for a cash game. So you're going to want to stick with fundamentally sound quarterbacks. And I just dropped box checkers, but I'll just take this second to show you. Where are we with, hopefully this is the one. Yeah, there's quarterback, home, favored, high game total, efficient quarterback, under 8K in salary on DraftKings are a couple of key components to quarterbacks that typically pay off their salary and typically reach value. Well, okay, Dak and Stafford and Baker Mayfield are blue. They're in pretty good positions. They're checking most of the boxes. They're either at home or they're favored or they're efficient or whatever. They're not checking all the boxes like Lamar, though. This week, Lamar is in an outstanding matchup. He's in an outstanding position. We know he runs. We know he has a floor. We know he's passing better this year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the situation that he's in, he's cheap enough. He's efficient this year, the QBR number. He's in a high game total. He's favored, and he's at home. And these are things that typically lead to a good game from a quarterback. So it makes sense that Lamar is leading the way. Now, Mahomes is probably a little bit overpriced. Great quarterback. But you're probably wasting a little bit of money choosing a Mahomes over. Heineke's cheap. That's fine. But Heineke didn't check a ton of boxes either. Stafford, Burrow, whatever. A lot of these guys didn't. Dak down there at 4% did. If you were in some sort of maybe a hybrid situation where you were maybe playing a triple up or 100-man league or maybe even a 3-man type of league and you wanted to go with Dak and CeeDee Lamb, oh my God, that's a very smart play because Dak is in a very good situation too. He was blue in that graphic, and he's getting a little bit off of the ownership that Lamar has. But let's be honest, Lamar is not driving so much ownership that you have to play him. If Lamar was going to be 40 to 50% owned in a cash game, which means he's probably showing up here at 20 to 25%, being that this is a tournament projection, then yeah, you probably almost have to play him. I made a big mistake last week in the showdown slate when I did not play him. I put somebody else in the captain, thinking that if I get 20 points out of Lamar, I can overcome that a little bit with some other players in my lineup. What I was worried about that actually came to fruition was if Lamar has a big game and gets 25 points or so, then that 1.5x multiplier in a showdown format, instead of 25 points like I would have for having him in my flex spot, everybody else would be getting 40 points or more having him in their captain. And that 15 to 20 point gap becomes too much to overcome with anybody else in my lineup. And it burned me. It burned me really, really bad. And it's because I wasn't paying attention. What I wasn't paying attention to was how highly owned Lamar was going to be in the captain spot. Lamar was going to be 60-some-odd% owned in the captain spot. Well, in a cash game, in a 50-50 or something like that, I don't need Lamar to do well or to fail or anything. Because 66 out of 100 of us are going up and down with whatever Lamar does. And there's still plenty of room in a cash game when I only have to get into the top 50%. If 66% of us tank with Lamar, sure, 40% of the world, is cashing. But there's still that remaining 10% that we can sneak into and still cash, even if we had a bad game out of Lamar. That's the concept with this chalkboard, is you're looking for that big, big ownership gap, that big ownership to tell you that somebody kind of has to be played. Lamar isn't so different here from Mahomes and Heineke and Stafford and whatever that he has to be played. It makes a lot of sense that he's the leader in ownership right now because of what I showed you with the green graphic and the blue graphic, but it's not a mandatory requirement. We're looking for the mandatory requirements. If you come down here, it's 18, 16, 15%. Okay, these guys are all in good positions. These guys are probably all safe enough for cash games at wide receiver. These guys down here are pivot plays, right? See how much the difference is from 18, 16% down here to 9 and 8%. I mean, you're going to want to use these guys as much as possible. But should you use Cooper Kupp instead of Terry McLaurin? Sure, you can do that. Would you use Cooper Kupp? Would you use Brandon Cooks instead of Cooper Kupp? Probably not. The ownership dictates that these plays are probably the sensible and smart plays. But again, there's nobody standing so far out that you have to use them at wide receiver. At running back, this is where we'll oftentimes see that happen, but we don't see it here. Again, ownership's pretty spread out. Now again, this is probably mid to late week. We need to keep watching this over the next day or two. But what you're looking for right now is some ownership separation. We just are not seeing it. Again, these numbers will probably change. Maybe something will develop. Maybe somebody will get hurt in practice. Maybe something will happen where all of a sudden somebody jumps. But right now, you're looking at these guys making the most sense in cash. Now, Darrell Henderson was on that running back graphic list. If you look at the box checkers article on the website, Austin Eckler was in that list. DeAndre Swift was not. Maybe DeAndre Swift is bad chalk this week. Josh Jacobs is way up there. He's probably bad chalk this week. Jonathan Taylor's probably fine. Terrell Williams, everyone's going to jump on that. He's a backup in Kansas City. They're expecting him to get decent workload for his price. He probably won't get the same workload as like a Dalvin Cook, but he's going to get some good workload, being that there are no competition for touches in that backfield. And he's cheap. So a lot of people will be on that. Should they be on Devontae Booker? I don't know. But they won't be on Antonio Gibson, Nick Chubb, even though Nick Chubb's in a good spot. Ezekiel Elliott, they won't be on these guys down here as much. So even though these guys checked a lot of boxes in the box checkers article, I would not be using them for a cash game. There's not enough ownership to carry it. I would rather hide in the ownership up there at the 20% mark than I would down here on a better play at the 6% mark. I'd rather use the 6% play as a tournament pivot or a league or a hybrid type of situation where leverage matters a little bit. Leverage doesn't matter in a cash game, so I'll stay with the ownership. I'll pick among the best of those. Eckler, yes. Henderson, yes. Those are probably my cash game running backs. Even though Ezekiel Elliott could be used in a cash game, he's safe enough, he's in a good enough matchup, he's not bringing the ownership along with him right now for me to choose him over Eckler, who's also in a great cash game situation, but also has that insulation of ownership with him. Hopefully that makes sense. This is probably the better explanation so far, is that we're using these ownerships as a combination. And this week right now, like I said, it's early in the week still for ownerships. They're not really defining themselves just yet. They're all pretty balanced. Tight end's another place where we'll a lot of times find a big gap, and you don't see one again. 15 down to 10%, sure, you're probably using any of these top 2 or 3 guys. So Mark Andrews, Kelsey, Ricky Seals-Jones. Ricky Seals-Jones if you're paying down, Mark Andrews if you're paying, or Kelsey if you're paying up. But the fact of the matter is, last week, Ricky Seals-Jones at 2,900 was showing up massive ownership. And he ended up dropping, as the week went on. And I don't know who it was that came up instead, but Ricky Seals-Jones was still a fine play. If he's in a decent enough situation, game script and whatever else, he's only $3,000. What's he got to get you? A couple of catches and 30 yards. If he falls into the end zone, he smashes value. So he's fine. I would use him over a Noah Fant, because Noah Fant might be in a little bit better spot than a Ricky Seals-Jones. Ricky Seals-Jones did not make the tight end list in box checkers. Noah Fant did. But I'd probably be, and so did Darren Waller, but I'd probably be using Ricky Seals-Jones first because he carries a little bit more ownership and he's a lot cheaper. I'll save the $1,800, thank you very much, and I'll move on. I'll pay up for another running back, or I'll pay up for a different quarterback, or maybe upgrade my wide receiver a little bit to a Cooper Kupp or something like that. These are how you're going to kind of use these things. You want to save money where you can, where you can get a great situation and get a very, a cheaper price if it makes sense, with some ownership to help validate the choice. And then you can use that savings to go somewhere else. Our high floor positions are quarterback and running back. Those are the places you want to typically pay up. Wide receiver, maybe a pay up for one of those spots, but typically it's a volatile position. Tight end is typically a volatile position. Not everybody's Travis Kelce, who kind of is guaranteed, but not everybody costs what Travis Kelce costs either. So with wide receiver and tight end and even defense, you're going to want to tend to pay down. That's where you're going to take your savings. That's where you're going to take your discount and then pay up in the other positions. You're going to build a stronger, more dependable, more reliable lineup that way. Looking at defense again, I don't care about defense very often when it comes to cash games, but looks like the Indianapolis Colts are going to lead the way. Cleveland Browns probably, but what's the difference between the Cleveland Browns and the Baltimore Ravens at 26 and 2,300 at 7 and 8%? Nothing. Versus Detroit at 2,100? Nothing. So pick any of those guys. You know what I mean? But if you're going to pay up a little bit, looks like Indianapolis is taking the lead in Clubhouse. If I go to FanDuel, it's the same concept. Maybe we'll see some ownership breaks. These three quarterbacks, again, probably be where I'd be picking from, and it would be Lamar Jackson for me. Down here at, let's do running back next. There's Darrell Henderson again. There's Austin Eckler again. There's Terrell Williams again. These guys are getting the lion's share, but these guys down here are close. So that's McCaffrey, Swift, Jonathan Taylor. Looking at box checkers, I won't be taking McCaffrey this week. He's $3,000 more expensive than Darrell Henderson. He's $2,000 more expensive than Austin Eckler. He's a little bit lower owned, which again isn't a big deal, but he's not in the matchup spot. He's not in the spot. I would take probably even a Jonathan Taylor at $2,500 cheaper than a Christian McCaffrey because they're in similar spots and I'll save the money. Now, would I pay up if I had excess money burning a hole in my pocket? Absolutely. So that's what I'm going to use the wide receiver and the tight end spots to determine. Because, I mean, I wouldn't mind a Christian McCaffrey, but it would have to be where I didn't need the $2,500. If I needed the $2,500, I'd use it somewhere else. Okay? But then again, names like Ezekiel Elliott and Nick Chubb and Aaron Jones, who were all on that list and pretty high on that running back list in box checkers, don't factor in for cash games because nobody else is playing them either. So I'd be sticking again to Henderson, Eckler, maybe Darrell Williams, maybe not on FanDuel, but Jonathan Taylor types. It's the same guys, again, from one site to the other for the most part. I'll come down here to wide receiver. There's some big 20s. Now we're getting up here with Adams and Tyreek Hill. Maybe where you would use a Cooper Kupp over on DraftKings, you'll use a Devontae Adams over here on FanDuel. Touchdowns are king, and Devontae Adams gets targeted in the red zone quite a bit. I don't know if you'd use Tyreek Hill or Terry McLaurin or what, but these guys are the guys that you should be considering. And you go through and say, how many boxes does he check? How many does he hit? How many does he check? What's his price point? Does it justify the ownership, the situation? Do I need the money to save the money? Blah, blah, blah. That's really what you're considering in your head, back and forth and back and forth. And there is no black and white clear-cut answer for any of this. There are players that are more viable than others. There are players that make more sense than others. But you're using these ownerships out of the chalkboard to guide you because you might have 5 or 6 guys, like I said in the running back, Ezekiel Elliott, Aaron Jones. They're considerable this year. Or this week. You can consider them. But you're going to use the ownership then to go, nope, don't need them. I've got other guys that are in the same situation that are being being played by more people. So there's some safety in that. So in cash games, I'm going to run towards that safety. In tournaments, I might run away from it. Ezekiel Elliott's a great play in a tournament this week. Phenomenal play. Even Aaron Jones is a good play in a tournament this week. And these guys down here, Jamar Chase checked a lot of boxes. Marquise Brown checked a lot of boxes, but they're tournament plays because they're down here, right? Your cash plays are going to be up here. Kelsey, Andrews, Waller, They're all great plays. And they're all commanding a lot of Why? Because on FanDuel, you can generally save money in a lot of different places, and the pricing is not as restrictive or as tight. So you can pay up for a Travis Kelce, who's a big red zone threat. Mark Andrews, big red zone threat. And they get a lot of targets during the week. They're safe. If I've got the $3,000 that I saved from going off of Christian McCaffrey, down to Darrell Henderson, then maybe I take that $3,000 and I invest it coming up off of an unpredictable Ricky Seals-Jones or an unpredictable Noah Fant and go up to a very predictable Travis Kelce. That's going to build a safer lineup, and it's not really costing me. It's not forcing me to sacrifice with anything. And again, defense is defense. So hopefully you see kind of how to use this tool. Hopefully it helps in terms of determining those cash versus GPP plays, and you're building stronger, higher floor, more balanced top-to-bottom lineups using this tool than you would be if you were just going it alone, because that's what the tool's for. It's a convenience tool. All right, guys. Peace out, homie. Talk to you soon.